And it was conveniently forgotten that the Jews in Paris who were arrested in the Marais, in the Jewish section of Paris, and in other places too, were arrested by the French police. The Germans would have been happy to do it, but they didn't need to, because the French police were so eager to do that. And in this film, there was Jews and other people, and communists and other people who were sent away were packed off to a place called Drancy, which is, if you've ever taken the RER in from the airport, or to the airport, to Roissy Airport in Paris, you've gone through Drancy, and that was a transit camp. And in transit camps, rather like Malines or Mechelen in Belgium, or Westerbork, I guess it's called in the Netherlands, quite near the German border, these camps were run by French, Belgians, and Dutch. They were not run by the Nazis. The Nazis would have been happy to do it, but the local populations, the local collaborators were doing that. And in this film made in 1953, in the original, you can see a French gendarme who's guarding the Jews at Drancy. Now, in the documentary that was finally released, somebody has reached in and plucked him from the film, and he simply disappears. It's doctored. So the French gendarme with his French gendarme hat isn't in the film. Because the myth was, of course, that the Jews were taken away by the Germans, and that communist resistors were shot by the Germans, and the gypsies and gay people were taken away by the Germans, were arrested by the Germans, and that France resisted and didn't collaborate. The collaboration was widespread. It was not simply an elite. The elites were more apt to collaborate earlier in the war. Later in the war, the kinds of people who joined the militia, which formed in January 1943, which was the French equivalent of the Gestapo, tended to be sort of down and out. They were the kinds of people who in Germany joined the SS, many of them, in the 1920s, saw it as a form of social mobility. There's a really good film called La Comme Lucien that I haven't seen in years about somebody who between his ears there wasn't very much, and the resistance doesn't want him because he's just kind of an idiot. He doesn't believe in anything, but the militia is very happy to have him, and it's about what happens to him in the southwest of France. During the Papon trial, which was maybe about 8 years ago, something like that, there was one time they interviewed a German officer who was still alive, and they said, well, look, what are your memories of Papon and the militia? He said, well, we got a guy. We arrested a French guy, and we rather liked him. We wouldn't turn him over to the militia because they would torture him so hideously. Of course, the Germans were capable of and did all over the place torture people hideously, no doubt about that. But the militia were generally bad guys. Big lie, of course, in Germany is people didn't know. Of course, people knew. They knew, and they knew in France too. They knew absolutely, and it fit into the xenophobia. It fit into Vichy's vision of what France would be, a vision in which the Catholic Church would have a much greater role. There were 2 people executed for abortion during the time, a corporatist ethic where, like Mussolini's corporatism, you'd eliminate class struggle by having everybody in vertical organizations. Everybody's happy to be French or happy to be Italian or happy to be German, and you forget the fact that your employer makes 10 times more than what you do. My good friend Eric Jennings, who teaches at Toronto, wrote a fantastic book called Vichy in the Tropics, and he looked at Guadeloupe, Indochina, and Madagascar. Because in those places, Vichy, you couldn't say, well, the Nazis made us do it, because there weren't any Nazis there. There were no German troops in those places. And yet there, in Vietnam, there were 27 Jews. And they desperately are trying to find these 27 Jews to send them to the death camps so far away, or to kill them themselves. So it was, the shield argument doesn't work. They collaborated, and in the end, a lot of them got what they wanted. And also, the other thing is the Catholic Church, if it sounds like, the business about the Pope helping Jews is just sheer nonsense, and nobody should ever be tricked by that. But the complicated role of the Catholic Church in France, there was the Archbishop of Toulouse, who was a very courageous guy who said, don't hurt anybody, who was encouraging really resistance implicitly. And the Archbishop of Albi, which is only an hour drive, if that, from Toulouse, he was an outright collaborator. And in many places, Catholic clergy who are opinion leaders in their village, along with the school teachers, were very, very important in helping give a moral kind of stamp two acts of resistance. It's what John Sweets called choices in Vichy France. Things happened that made you take a choice. Now, what were one of those things? The most important was the STO, the Service du Travail Obligatoire, which I wrote in the notes. The service, service in quotes, obligatory work service. And the deal was basically that if you agreed to go along to, to work in a German factory, that, well, they would let some prisoners of war go and all that. It doesn't work out like that. These people were fools. Two people from our village, one was dead drunk. He thought somebody told him he was going to a party, so we got on a bus, and the next stop is the Rhineland. And of course, those people are wasted by the bombing. I mean, because the Allies are the masters of the air for the last couple of years of the war, and they systematically devastate those factories. And a lot of those people in the STO that went left. But are killed, but left the earth. But what the STO did is it made people take a choice. Because if you didn't show up on the 9th of February, you picked the date, 1944, you didn't go. If you're sitting in your village, they're going to come and take you. So at that point, choices in Vichy France. I'm going to go into the resistance. Big choice. You go into the resistance, you live off the land. Sometimes just a couple of people, sometimes lots of people. International mix, lots of Poles were there, lots of Spaniards, but most of the people were French. And one of the interesting things is that the resistance itself did not, unlike almost everything, every big political event in France since the Revolution to 1981, did not follow traditional lines between right and left. That left-wing regions did not have a monopoly on the resistance. There was tons of resistance in Brittany. There was tons of resistance in Normandy. Eisenhower, after the war, said the French resistance was worth an entire division or two divisions. I can't remember exactly what he said. And of course, they helped prepare their way in Normandy for the invasion of June 6, 1944. So that old left-right dichotomy does not work in terms of regions. It does work in terms of what people were more likely to resist. Working people were more likely to resist. Because their unions had been broken by Vichy, because they were more apt to have supported the Popular Front. No to the France of the apéritif was the cry of the right in 1936. The no to the France of drinking before lunch and all of this. No to the France of the Jew Blum. Better Hitler than Blum, over and over again. So working people and peasants, like the ones who said, nous sommes rouges comme le vin, that I mentioned before, are more apt to resist. And there's a village called Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, which is right near Ardèche, and they had a cottage industry of making fake ID for Jewish children from Lyon and Saint-Étienne who were kept in this small village and who were saved because of these people. And whenever the Germans would come through, which wasn't that often, they would hide the children, or the Germans would go through and said, my God, there are a lot of children. Well, these are practicing Catholics, aren't they? Well, they weren't. They were practicing Protestants. So those are the more famous cases. But lots of people resisted. But lots of people collaborated. And many other people were indifferent. That's the way it is.